Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. My name is Sophia and I've always prided myself on my ability to create beauty out of chaos. Whether it's through my work as a hairdresser where I transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, or in my personal life where I've managed to craft a seemingly perfect existence. My husband, Leo, is a charming and hardworking architect. Together, we've been married for 5 years and our life together is what you'd call picture perfect. Our home, nestled in a cozy house in a quiet suburb, is where everyone knows everyone and life seems to move at a gentle pace. The kind of place where children play in the streets until the street lights come on and neighbors wave hello over white picket fences. It's idyllic, almost too good to be true. And rounding out our little family is Milo, our German shepherd, whose wagging tail and boundless energy bring joy to our days. But beneath this serene surface a storm was brewing. It started subtly like the first drops of rain on a sunny day. I noticed Leo coming home later than usual, his explanations growing more vague at first. I brushed it off as the demands of his job, the late-night meetings, the unexpected deadlines. But as time passed, the signs grew more pronounced, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collar, the distant look in his eyes when he thought I wasn't watching. I remember one evening as I was setting the table for dinner. The silence between us was palpable. I had prepared his favorite meal, hoping to bridge the growing gap with something familiar, something comforting. But as he sat down, his phone buzzed incessantly, drawing his attention away from me from us work. He said, his voice flat, his eyes not meeting mine. I wanted to believe him, to trust in the life we had built together. But doubt, like a weed, had taken root in my heart. The next day, while styling a client's hair, I found myself lost in thought, my hands moving mechanically through the strands. My client, sensing my distraction, asked if everything was okay. I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and assured her everything was fine. But inside I was anything but fine. That evening I decided to confront Leo. I waited until Milo was asleep, his soft snoring filling the room before I spoke. Leo, we need to talk. I began, my voice steady but my heart racing. He looked up from his laptop, his expression guarded. About what? About us? I said the words heavy with unspoken fears about where we stand. The conversation that followed was like navigating through a minefield. Each word was chosen with care, each silence loaded with meaning. Leo admitted to being stressed, to feeling overwhelmed, but he denied any wrongdoing. Yet his assurances felt hollow, like promises made on shifting sands. As weeks turned into months, the cracks in our perfect life became more visible. I found myself questioning everything. Was it just the stress of his job, or was there something more? The doubt gnawed at me, turning my days into a relentless search for truth. One evening, after Leo had left for another late meeting, I decided to follow him. My heart pounded in my C*******T as I trailed his car through the familiar streets of our town, then out into the less familiar outskirts. He pulled into a nondescript building, one I had never seen before. I parked a safe distance away, my hands trembling as I watched a mentor. The building was nondescript, but the feeling in my gut was anything but. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. My mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. When Leo finally emerged, he wasn't alone. A woman, her laughter floating on the night air, walked beside him. They seemed at ease, familiar, and my world tilted on its axis. The drive back home was a blur. I felt like I was outside of my body, watching my life unravel from a distance. The perfect life I had so meticulously crafted was now under the weight of a hidden secret, threatening to shatter everything I held dear. But what happens when the perfect life cracks under the weight of a hidden secret? That's what I was about to find out. The day started like any other. Leo left early for meeting, leaving me with a quick kiss and a promise to be home for dinner. I had a busy day at the salon, styling hair, chatting with clients and enjoying the usual gossip. Milo, as always, was my companion, lying quietly in the corner, his tail thumping against the floor whenever someone paid him attention. After work, I decided to take Milo for a walk in the park, a routine that usually helped me unwind. However, today something fell off. There was an unusual tension in the air, or perhaps it was just in me. As we walked through the park, the familiar paths felt different, almost as if they were leading somewhere new. The trees, usually so welcoming, seemed to whisper secrets I couldn't quite grasp. Milo, sensing my unease, stayed close. His leash taught the usual sounds of children playing and birds chirping seemed muted, replaced by a heavy silence that weighed on my heart. I found myself stopping at our usual bench, the one where Leo and I had shared countless conversations, dreams and plans for our future today. Though it felt like a relic from a different life. I sat down watching Milo chase a squirrel, his carefree spirit a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. My mind wandered back till last night to the sight of Leo with that woman. The image was seared into my memory, vivid and painful. I tried to rationalize it to find some explanation that didn't involve betrayal. Maybe she was a colleague, a friend, someone he was helping, but the ease with which they interacted, the laughter that seemed to dance in the night air, it all pointed to something more intimate. I felt a tear escape, tracing a cold path down my cheek. Milo, ever the empathy, came back and rested his head on my lap, looking up at me with those big understanding eyes. I stroked his fur, finding some comfort in his warmth. The park was emptying, now the sun beginning its descent, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch towards me, enveloping me in their darkness. I stood up, deciding it was time to go home, but not before I made a silent bow to myself. I needed answers, not just for my peace of mind, but for the sake of what we had built together. Walking back, each step felt heavier than the last. The neighborhood, with its white picket fences and manicured lawns, looked the same, yet everything had changed. I glanced at our house as we approached its windows dark, reflecting nothing but my own troubled face. Once inside, I let Milo off his leash, watching him bound towards his water bowl. I stood in the foyer, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I moved to the kitchen, my hands automatically going through the motions of making dinner, but my mind was elsewhere. I needed to confront Leo, but not in anger or desperation. I needed clarity to understand if the life we had was salvageable, or if it had already slipped through my fingers like sand. I set the table, the clink of the cutlery sounding too loud in the quiet house. As I waited, the minutes stretched into an eternity. Each tick of the clock was a melunder of the time slipping away, of the life I thought I knew unraveling. I sat at the table, my hands folded, my heart racing, waiting for Leo to come home to explain, to perhaps mend what was broken. But as the evening wore on, the realization dawned on me that tonight might not bring the answers I sought. Leo was late again. The dinner I had prepared with such hope now sat cold, a silent testament to the growing distance between us. I stood up, moving to the window, peering out into the darkness. The street was empty, the usual warmth of our neighborhood replaced by a cold, foreboding emptiness. I felt a chill, not just from the night air, but from the uncertainty that now defined my life. Little did I know this walk would lead me down a path. I never imagined the park was unusually empty, and as Milo and I wandered, we ended up near the old community center, a place long abandoned but still holding memories of community events. The door to the locker room was slightly ajar, and Milo, ever the curious cute dog, darted inside following him. I found myself in a dimly lit musty room filled with old lockers and forgotten gym equipment. It was there, in the solitude of that forgotten space, that something inexplicable happened. The air was thick, with the scent of mildew and old leather. Milo's nose was to the ground, sniffing out the remnants of past lives, while I stood there, feeling the weight of my own life pressing down on me. The silence was almost tangible, wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. I leaned against a locker, the cold metal pressing into my back, and I felt a surge of loneliness, a kind of isolation that was both physical and emotional. In that moment, Milo came over his tail, wagging his eyes full of an innocent joy that seemed so out of place. In this forgotten room he nudged my hand, and I found myself petting him, feeling the warmth of his fur, the steady beat of his heart. It was then that a strange, inexplicable urge overtook me. I don't know what came over me, but in that quiet, abandoned place, I began to speak to Milo as if he could understand every word I told him, about my fears, about Leo, about the life I thought I had and the one I was now living. My voice echoed slightly in the empty room, each word a confession to the only being who seemed to truly listen. Milo sat down, his head tilted to one side, his eyes locked on mine. It was as if he was absorbing every syllable, Every emotion I found myself kneeling beside him, my face buried in his fur, tears streaming down my face. I whispered secrets, fears and hopes into his ear, things I couldn't even articulate to myself until now. The act of confiding in Milo, of letting go of the facade I had maintained for so long felt like a release. It was as if I was shedding layers of pretense, revealing the raw, vulnerable core of my being, and Milo in his simple, cute dog-like way seemed to offer a silent promise of unconditional love and acceptance. I stayed there with Milo for what felt like hours. The world outside this locker room, with its betrayals and uncertainties, seemed distant, almost unreal. Here in this forgotten space I found a strange sanctuary, a place where I could be myself without pretense or fear of judgment. As the light began to fade, casting long shadows through the small, grimy windows, I knew it was time to leave, but something had shifted within me. The act of speaking my truth, even if only to a cute dog, had changed something fundamental. I felt a resolve, forming a determination to face whatever was coming next with a clarity I hadn't possessed before. I stood up, wiping my eyes, and looked around one last time. The locker room, with its peeling paint and rusted lockers, seemed less like a place of decay and more like a crucible where something new was being forged. "Come on, Milo," I said, my voice stronger now. He followed me out, his tail wagging as if he knew we were leaving something behind, something that had no place in our future. The walk back home was different. The air felt lighter, the shadows less menacing. I felt like I had crossed a threshold, not just into the locker room but into a new phase of my life. The community center, with its memories and its ghosts, had given me a moment of clarity, a moment where I could see myself not as the betrayed wife, but as someone who could still find strength, and perhaps even a new beginning. As we approached our house, the lights were on, casting a warm glow that contrasted with a cold night. Leo's car was in the driveway, but instead of the usual dread, I felt a surge of something else. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the beginning of something, a resolve to confront, to understand, and perhaps to rebuild. I opened the door, Milo bounding in ahead of me, his usual exuberance back. Leo was there, looking up from his laptop, his face a mask of concern or perhaps guilt. I took a deep breath, the words I had whispered to Milo, now ready to be spoken aloud. "Leo, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, my heart no longer racing with fear, but with a newfound determination. What happened next would change my life forever. But how would I face the consequences? That was the question that lingered as I stepped into the light, ready to confront the truth. Whatever it might be, the aftermath was immediate and overwhelming. Guilt, confusion, and a profound sense of betrayal towards Leo consumed me. I left the locker room in a daze, Milo following me with his usual oblivious joy. The walk home was a blur, my mind racing with what had just occurred. At home, I tried to act normal, but Leo noticed something was off. He asked if everything was all right, and I lied, saying I was just tired. That night, as Leo slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, the weight of my actions pressing down on me like a physical force. The next morning the house was silent, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Leo had left early for work, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. Had to go in early. "Love you." His words felt hollow, like echoes in an empty room. I sat at the table staring at the note, feeling the distance between us grow with each passing second. I decided to take Milo for another walk, hoping the fresh air might clear my mind. The park was different today, less a place of solace and more a stage for my internal drama. Every tree, every bench seemed to mock me with memories of happier times. Milo, sensing my mood, stayed close, his leash loose in my hand. As we walked, my thoughts were a whirlwind. I replayed the scene in the locker room, over and over, the words I had whispered to Milo, the raw honesty. It was as if I had opened a door I couldn't close. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and yet there was a strange liberation in it. I had spoken my truth, even if it was just to a cute dog. The path led us to the outskirts of the park near the old community center. Again the building stood there, a silent witness to my unraveling. I paused, looking at its weathered facade, feeling an inexplicable pull. Milo tugged at his leash, eager to explore, and I let him lead me inside. Once more, the locker room was as I had left it, but now in the daylight it seemed less foreboding, more like a place where secrets could be confronted rather than hidden. I sat down on the same bench, the one where I had bared my soul. The air was still heavy with the scent of mildew, but now it mixed with a faint aroma of pine from the trees outside. A reminder that life goes on, even in decay. I took out my phone, my fingers trembling, as I scrolled through my contacts. I needed to talk to someone who could understand, who could guide me through the storm. My thumb hovered over Leo's number, but I couldn't bring myself to call him. Instead, I dialed my sister Ava. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Sophia, what's up?" Her voice was warm, a stark contrast to the cold dread in my heart. "You need to talk." I managed my voice cracking. "Can you meet me at the park?" "Of course, I'll be there in 21. I hung up feeling a slight relief. Ava was always the pragmatic one, the one who could see through the fog of emotion as I waited. I watched Milo play with a fallen leaf, his simple joy, a balmy to my troubled thoughts. Ava arrived, her expression shifting from concern to alarm as she saw my face. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I told her everything, the late nights, the suspicions, the confrontation, and finally the locker room confession. She listened, her face a mask of empathy, her hand reaching out to squeeze mine. "You've been carrying this alone, Sophia. You don't have to anymore," she said softly. We talked for hours sitting on that bench, the world around us fading into a backdrop for our conversation. Ava suggested I confront Leo not with anger, but with the calm resolve I had found in the locker room. She malingered me of my strength, of the woman who could turn chaos into beauty. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the park, I felt a resolve solidify within me. I thanked Ava, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. She hugged me tightly, promising to be there for whatever came next. Walking back home, the air felt different. Charged with the anticipation of what was to come, Milo trotted beside me, his tail wagging. Perhaps sensing the shift in my mood. The house was dark when we arrived, the lights Leo had left on, now casting eerie shadows. I let Milo off his leash, watching him bound towards his water bowl, his usual routine, unchanged by the turmoil in my life. I moved to the kitchen, the dinner I had prepared the night before, still sitting on the table, now cold and uninviting. I cleared it away, my movements mechanical, my mind focused on the conversation I was about to have. Leo came home later than usual, his steps heavy on the porch. I heard the key in the lock, the door opening, and then his voice tentative. "Sophia." I turned to face him, my heart steady, my resolve firm. "We need to talk." "Leo, really talk?" He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for a clue, for a sign of what was to come. I saw the flicker of fear, the realization that this was not just another routine check-in. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite me. He complied, his posture tense, his hands clasped on the table. I took a deep breath, the words I had whispered to Milo, now ready to be spoken aloud. "I know about her. Leo. I saw you with her." The silence that followed was deafening. Leo's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound. The truth was out, and with it the perfect life we had built together was about to be tested in ways neither of us could have predicted. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and Sophia's secret was about to be exposed in the most unexpected way. The next day, Leo found a piece of evidence from the locker room, a forgotten hair tie of mine which I had left behind in my haste. Confronted with this, I broke down, confessing everything. The words tumbled out, each one heavier than the last, as I recounted my suspicions, my surveillance, and the heart-wrenching sight of him with another woman. Leo's reaction was a mix of shock, disgust, and heartbreak, his face, usually so composed, contorted with emotions I had never seen before. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, a sound that seemed to echo the shattering of our life together. "I need some space," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a knife. He grabbed his keys and without another word, he left the house. The door slammed shut, leaving me in a deafening silence, filled only by Milo's soft whines. Sensing the turmoil but not understanding it, I sat there, the weight of my confession pressing down on me. The room felt colder, the walls seemed to close in, and the life I had so carefully constructed was now a fragile shell, cracked and vulnerable. Hours passed, and with each tick of the clock my anxiety grew. I paced the house, my mind racing with scenarios of what could happen next. Would Leo come back? Could we salvage what was left of our marriage? The uncertainty was suffocating. Milo, ever the faithful companion, followed me, his eyes full of concern. I knelt down, wrapping my arms around him, seeking comfort in his warmth. What do we do now? Milo, I whispered, my voice breaking. The night stretched on, and Leo didn't return. The silence was oppressive, and in that quiet I made a decision. I couldn't just wait. I needed to act, to understand, to perhaps find a way to heal, or at least to cope with a new reality. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling. As I dialed Ava's number again, she answered quickly, her voice laced with worry. Sophia, what's happened? Leo found out. I said, the words tasting bitter. He left. I don't know if he's coming back. Ava was silent for a moment. Then her voice came through, firm and reassuring. You're not alone in this. Sophia, we'll figure it out together. Do you want me to come over? Yes, please, I replied, feeling a small relief at the thought of her presence. Ava arrived shortly, her face set in determination. We sat in the living room, the usual warmth of our home, now feeling like a distant memory. She listened as I recounted the confrontation, her hand squeezing mine in support. You need to give him time, she advised. And you need to take care of yourself. This isn't just about him, it's about you too. Her words were a bomb, but the pain was still raw. We talked into the night discussing options, possibilities, and the harsh reality of what might come. Ava suggested I focus on myself, perhaps take a break from the salon, spend time with Milo, and consider counseling. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the windows, I felt a resolve forming. I would not let this break me. I would find a way to move forward, whether with Leo or on my own. The next few days were a blur. Leo didn't come home, and his absence was a constant reminder of the fracture in our lives. I went through the motions at the salon, my client sensing something was off but not prying. Milo was my anchor, his presence a reminder of the love that still existed in my life, even if it was now tinged with sorrow. One evening as I was locking up the salon, I noticed a figure outside. My heart skipped a beat, hoping it was Leo, but it was Ava. She had something in her hand, an envelope. This came for you, she said, handing it over. It was from Leo, his handwriting, familiar yet now foreign. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter. His words measured and careful. Sophia, I need time to process everything. I'm staying at a hotel for now. I'm not sure what happens next, but I want you to know I'm thinking about us, about everything. Please, take care of yourself. Leo. The letter was a lifeline, a small sign that he hadn't completely shut me out. I read it over and over, each word, a small comfort, yet each also a reminder of the uncertainty. Ava stayed with me that night, and we talked about what I might say if Leo came back. She helped me draft a response, one that was honest yet not desperate, one that conveyed my willingness to work on us, but also my strength to stand alone if needed. The days turned into weeks, and Leo's absence became a new normal. I began to focus on myself. Taking Ava's advice, I started therapy, finding solace in speaking to someone who could guide me through the emotional turmoil. Milo and I took long walks, his companionship invaluable as I navigated this new chapter. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. My heart raced, but I st myself walking to the door. There stood Leo, looking tired, his eyes searching mine for something, perhaps forgiveness or understanding. Sophia, he started, his voice hoarse. Can we talk? I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where our life had begun to unravel. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of what had been said and what had been left unsaid. I've been thinking a lot. Leo began, his gaze fixed on the table. About us, about what I've done, about what we've lost. I listened, my heart in my throat, waiting for him to continue. I want to try, Sophia, if you're willing. I want to see if we can rebuild what we had. But I understand if you can't. The room was silent, save for the soft ticking of the clock. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the man I had loved, the man who had hurt me, and the man who is now asking for a second chance. I need time. Leo, I said, my voice steady. Time to heal, to think. But I'm willing to try for us for what we had. He nodded, relief washing over his features. Thank you, Sophia. That's all I can ask for. That night we talked more about everything and nothing about the future and the past. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning, a tentative step towards understanding, and perhaps in time forgiveness, as Leo left, promising to return the next day. I felt a mix of emotions: hope, fear, determination. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks I felt like I could breathe, like there was a possibility of healing, of finding beauty in the chaos once again. With her marriage hanging by a thread, what would Sophia do to salvage what was left of her life? The answer was not straightforward, but it was clear she would face it head-on, with Milo by her side and with a resolve to find her own strength. Whether alone or with Leo in the days that followed, Leo and I had long, painful conversations. Each word was like a step through a minefield, each silence heavy with the weight of our shared history and the betrayal that now loomed over us. We sat at our kitchen table, the same place where we had shared countless meals, now a battleground for our emotions. I think we should try therapy, I suggested one evening, my voice barely above a whisper. The idea had been circling in my mind, a beacon of hope. Amidst the storm, Leo looked up, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pain and consideration. I agree, he said after a moment. For us, for what we had, for what we could still have, therapy was an arduous journey. It wasn't just about healing. It was about understanding the depths of our vulnerabilities and the complexities of human emotions. We met with Dr. Isabella, a therapist recommended by Ava, whose office was a sanctuary of calm with its soft lighting and the scent of lavender in the air. Our first session was awkward, filled with the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Dr. Isabella, with her gentle demeanor, guided us through the initial discomfort. Tell me about a moment when you felt truly connected, she asked, her voice soothing. I thought back to our early days, to the laughter and the dreams we shared. It was when we were planning our first trip together, I said, my voice catching. We were so excited, talking about all the places we'd visit, the memories we'd make. Leo nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. We were so hopeful. Then he added, his voice tinged with nostalgia. As sessions continued, we delved deeper. I learned about my own insecurities, how my need for perfection had perhaps blinded me to the imperfections in our relationship. Leo, in turn, opened up about his feelings of inadequacy, his fear of not living up to the expectations set by our seemingly perfect life. I felt like I was failing you, he confessed one session, his eyes downcast. And instead of facing it, I ran from it into something that felt easier. The admission was like a knife, but it was also a key unlocking doors to understanding. We both had our roles in the unraveling of our marriage, and acknowledging that was the first step towards healing. Milo, our loyal companion, remained a constant presence. His wagging tail and boundless energy were a meander of the unconditional love that still existed in our home, a love that transcended human imperfection. He would often sit beside us during our therapy sessions, his head resting on one of our laps, offering silent support. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Leo and I walked through the park with Milo. The air was crisp, the kind that hints at the coming of autumn. We walked in silence for a while, each lost in thought. I'm sorry, Sophia, Leo finally said, his voice breaking the quiet. For everything I want to understand you better, to be better for you. I stopped, turning to face him. I know, Leo, and I'm sorry too for not seeing, for not listening when I should have. We stood there, the distance between us not just physical but filled with the weight of our past and the tentative hope for our future. Let's keep trying, I said, reaching for his hand, his fingers intertwined with mine, a small but significant gesture. Therapy continued, and with each session we peeled back layers of ourselves, revealing fears, dreams, and the raw, vulnerable parts we had kept hidden. It was during one of these sessions that Dr. Isabella introduced an exercise where we had to write letters to each other expressing what we truly felt, what we needed, and what we hoped for. Reading Leo's letter was like looking into his soul. I've seen the woman you are, Sophia, beyond the perfection you strive for. I've seen your strength, your compassion, and I want to be the man who deserves that, he wrote. His words were a balm soothing the wounds of betrayal. My letter to him was equally revealing. I want to forgive not just for what you did, but for who I believe you can be. I want us to rebuild, not on the ruins of our past, but on the foundation of our love and the lessons we've learned. The process was not linear. There were setbacks, moments when old wounds seemed to reopen, but we persisted. We learned to communicate better, to listen not just to the words but to the emotions behind them. One day, as we sat in Dr. Isabella's office, she looked at us with a gentle smile. You've both made significant progress. But remember, healing is a journey, not a destination. We nodded, understanding that while we had come far, the road ahead was still long. Back at home, life began to take on a new rhythm. Leo started coming home earlier, his work no longer an escape but a part of our shared life. We made dinner together, laughed over small things, and slowly the house felt like a home again. But would their love be strong enough to overcome this ultimate test? The answer was unfolding with each passing day, each conversation, each shared moment. We were learning to live with the past, not as a shadow over us, but as a part of our story, a testament to our resilience and our commitment to each other as we moved forward. Not forgetting but learning, Milo remained by our side, his loyalty a constant reminder of what love could be. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were walking it together, not just side by side but hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks.